Welcome to Reflect, where the stories are real and the road is the backdrop. In today's episode, I'll be sharing my journey in the United States Navy. So why did I decide to go into the Navy? Well, kind of like a family tradition. My father was in the Navy, my oldest brother was in the Navy, and then after I went into the Navy, later, my nephew joined the Marines. What prompted me to go into the military, besides being a family tradition type thing, is back then, I had a passion to do it. Because if you don't have a passion for anything, you don't have any really interest to do much in life. So back in 2001, mind you, I was 33 years old then. I wasn't like I went into the Navy right out of high school. I chose to go into the Navy later in life. In fact, I had a wife and a very small child at the time. But I still wanted to do it, so I learned about this program that the Navy had back then, and I think other branches may have too. I'm not sure, but it was called the Advanced Pay Grade Opportunity or something. And what that means is, as a civilian, you could go into the Navy, and I just chose to go into the reserves at the time because I didn't really have an interest in doing any active duty, especially being my age with a family on the way, you know. So I chose to go into the Navy Reserve under their Advanced Pay Grade Opportunity. So what that means is, this advanced pay grade is kind of like going into the military with already having prior experience, but they take that experience from your civilian life. So because I had roles in management, I had college, they took that all into consideration, and I was actually able to go into the military with an advanced pay grade, meaning like your E5 was what my pay grade was. So I was able to go in as an E5 based on my training, my prior experience in civilian life, if that makes sense. So when I was talking to the recruiter, she said, hey, I could probably get you in with the pay rate of an E5 based on all that. And I'm like, okay, that sounds fair enough. And so we did that. We were talking about it, and then I was probably 2 weeks away from signing up to go in. Mind you, I still had to go to boot camp, right? You don't get a waiver just because you're going in as a E5. Yeah, you still have to go to boot camp, which I did. But before I get ahead of myself, so probably 2 weeks before I actually signed the dotted line, 9/11 happened. Okay, and of course, we all know what happened with that scenario and the terrorist attack on New York and all that. So it was a very trying time for not only Americans, but people around the world. And mind you, I was 2 weeks away from going in, signing on the line, right? So, yeah, it was a pretty tense feeling for not only me, but my wife. And so I called my recruiter like the very next day or the day after, and I said, hey, first thing she said out of her mouth is like, Scott, I completely understand if you don't want to go through with this. You have a family, you're 33 years old. She's like, I'm not going to get offended if you decide to just kind of postpone this a little bit, you know, based on what was going on in the world, right? But you know what? I talked to my wife about it, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? This is exactly the reason people defend our country. You know, we thrive for these moments. And so after a long talk with my wife, and my recruiter was saying, look, you're not going to probably face any real time. This will be a ground war. This is not going to be a sea war, even if something does go down. She's like, plus you got to go through all your training and whatnot. So she kind of convinced me that, yeah, I'll be okay. I'm not going to probably get deployed or do any active duty, which, you know, there's always that chance. So, and it made me want to do it even more. You know, after the stuff that went down in New York and other places, it kind of gave me that thirst to want to, you know, be of service in any way that I could, even if that was reserve status. I know there was a chance, there could have been a chance where, yeah, I might get called up to do something, but I was willing to sacrifice that because I just wanted to participate somehow. Thankfully, I never got signed up to go anywhere as far as active duty, but there was a risk. So I went in and I met with the recruiter, and I met with the commander of the base there here in Cincinnati, and basically I signed up. So I signed and gave my life away to the United States Navy back in 2001. Yeah, very tense time. And then I still had to go to boot camp, which was the following spring, I think. And I wanted to go to spring because the recruiter said, look, when you go to Great Lakes, it's cold in the winter, Great Lake, Illinois. She said, it's probably going to be better for you to schedule your boot camp in the spring or summer, which I did. And that was a very helpful tip. So my boot camp was scheduled for, like, I don't know, May or something, May or June of 2002, I want to say. Can't remember details now, but that worked out really well because when I got to Great Lakes, it was nicer weather out. You know, it wasn't any like freezing bitter cold, and you don't want to deal with that. So I did it kind of intelligently, where I did the best I could to go to boot camp in the most tolerable conditions instead of freezing, you know what I mean? That worked out pretty well, actually. But boot camp was a trip because, you know, you got kids that are like 18, 19 years old that are going through the boot camp as well. And here comes me, like 33-year-old, like an old man. I was able to go to boot camp with the people in my age group. So we actually were going to boot camp all together. So we had a barracks that was full of more mature people, which was kind of cool. But I still had to go through it. And I tell you what, that bus ride going to the Great Lakes facility was a trip, man. The ride on the bus was very somber. Nobody spoke. Everybody knew what they were getting themselves into, right? And it was just a weird, eerie experience riding that bus to Great Lakes. But I tell you, as soon as we stepped foot off that bus, then chaos happened. It was an orchestrated chaos that I was like really shocked, because you got military people just right away in your face, screaming in your ear, do this, do that. And even though you think you're prepared for it mentally, because I knew the game, I knew it was going to be that kind of situation, it's just never an experience that you want to deal with unless you absolutely have to. So yeah, I knew it was going to be fun. So I spent boot camp like anybody else, going through all the physical and mental requirements. And you know what? That's where grit comes in. If I didn't have grit, I probably would have never done it. You don't have to go in the military to display grit. I'm just using that as an example. So the passion and the grit and the determination is why I was able to basically pass boot camp and not quit. There were some people that didn't make it. You know, there's people after the second day that I never saw again. So I don't know what happened to them, but yeah, I don't know what happens in that case. You belong to the Navy, so yeah, it's very interesting. If you just quit, you can't quit really. So I don't know what happens to those people. I really don't. But there was a few in our division that I never saw again. I was able to get through boot camp, and I was able to tolerate it a lot better because I was in pretty good shape, even though I was 33. There were some people in my division, trust me, that were not in shape at all, and they had a really hard time, I remember. But I kind of thrived in the environment. After about the first 3 days, when you got that full night's rest after about 3 days, because you're up 24/7 probably for 2 days straight. That's just by design. So those first couple of days are the roughest, trust me. But once I got that full night's sleep, I woke up the next morning hearing the sounds of the voices of the marching outside and stuff, and I felt like a completely different person because I got rest, you know. And then from there on out, it got a little more tolerable. So then I was in the Navy for a while, and when you're in the reserve, you have like these 2-week training, they call it. Your training stuff happens, and that's where you pick an assignment for training. Well, me and 3 other guys that were kind of in the same unit at the reserve center, we chose to go to sign up for the Hawaii training because we were SKs, which is storekeepers in the Navy. Your pay grade is your pay rate is a SK. That's your rate, where your rank is E5. So we all like, hey, let's sign up for this 2-week training in Hawaii. And we're kind of laughing like, oh, we'll never get that. We're pretty new to the Navy. They're not going to let us do that. But sure enough, all 4 of us got approval to go to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and work on the docks because we were storekeepers, which is basically supply, you know. And we were shocked. I mean, back then that was crazy to think that me and 3 other guys are gonna all go together to Hawaii. Crazy experience, man. So we did it, and it was a long ass flight, I remember, but we were all pretty excited. And yeah, it was a good time. Now we worked though. We worked on the docks of Pearl Harbor all day long, except for weekends. So for 2 weeks we worked very hard labor, like on the docks of Pearl Harbor. And that was our job, that was our training, okay? And it was interesting. But then I made a silly kind of error. It wasn't really silly at the time. We were at this, we signed up for this luau or something, and there was vendors there, like that sold souvenirs and stuff, right? Well, I wanted to send something back home or bring something back home, and actually it was for my mother. And it was this coconut that had like a picture on it. You know, they painted these coconuts with it was a real pretty scene of like a sunset in Hawaii, and it had some words on it. I don't remember what it was. Well, the mistake I made was I paid for this coconut using my credit card. All right, so this dumbass person, this vendor in Honolulu, Hawaii, called our number at home like the next day or something for whatever damn reason. I have no idea, but she called our house number and she left a message saying, "This is so-and-so from Hawaii. It's about your husband." And that's it. Okay, can you imagine what my wife felt when she heard that message? I mean, I was so pissed at this vendor for making that stupid ass remark on a voicemail and being very vague about it. So my wife was in panic mode. She's like, oh my gosh, you know, she thought something happened to me, you know, all over a stupid souvenir coconut. And so anyway, my wife had a hell of a time trying to figure out what to do. My mother lived next to a person that was also in the Navy. It was a female, and she went over there, and I don't think she was a recruiter, but she was also in the reserve. And so this woman in the Navy starts making some phone calls, and my goodness, I'm not lying, guys, they got the Red Cross involved. Everybody's trying to find me. My wife's in sheer panic mode, thinking something happened to me, like worse, like something really bad happened to me. So they're calling the Red Cross. I'm working on the docks in Pearl Harbor. True story. The officer that was in charge of us came to the docks that we were working, and he said, Petty Officer Herman, you need to get to the commander's office here on the base. I'm like, what the hell? What did I do? Well, then I started thinking something that happened to somebody in my family, right? So I'm like, oh shit, what's going on? So I try to find the commander's office, you know, at Pearl Harbor, and I go in there, and he's got the phone here. He's like, the phone's right there. I think it's your wife. I'm like, okay. So I pick it up. I said, what's up? Hello? And she starts just crying. She's like, you're okay? I'm like, of course I'm okay. Are you okay? So we're both thinking what somebody's not okay, right? It was just a very miscommunication type deal, not only for that vendor, but for us to overthink it. But hell, what else would you think, you know? I mean, we were both like in shock, like, no, we're both okay. And she said, well, somebody from Hawaii called about you. And I don't know how I realized it was the vendor about the coconut, but I said, oh, I think that was because I bought a coconut on a credit card. They're just trying to verify payment or something. I don't know. Maybe she found out more later. But it was just a really weird misunderstanding, and yeah, I'll never forget that in a million years. Once she knew I was okay and I knew she was okay, it was pretty smooth sailing after that, I guess you could call it. But yeah, so guys, gals, if you ever ever go into the military, if you're younger and you hear this story, never ever 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 pay for something overseas with a credit card unless you are prepared to get some random strange phone call from the vendor about your credit card. That, as long as you know that going in, then you won't panic as much. But we had no idea. And why this lady thought she had to call to verify my credit card is completely beyond me. But maybe that was her policy, I don't know. But my goodness, to leave a stupid vague message, right? Like, it's about your husband. I'm in Hawaii. I'm like, why would I remember when I got home, I called that number and I gave her an earful. I'm like, why would you leave such an ignorant message? You had the Red Cross involved because of your error. Really. I was really hot about it because that probably took 10 years off my wife's life just from that stupid voicemail that she left, you know? I said, don't ever do that again to anyone else ever again. Please make sure you say it's about a verification of a credit card. That's all. God damn, some people just are stupid, aren't they? And they don't think right. But it was a good lesson for both of us. It turned out okay. We were both okay. It just gave us a big scare at the time. And even when I think about it today, I just freaking shake my head how ignorant that vendor was to do that. But, you know, at the same time, she didn't know any better either. You know what I mean? It was just an overreaction on both of our ends. What were we to think, right? Just an unfortunate, stupid error. And really, it wasn't even an error. It was our overreaction that got us into trouble. So that might be another lesson that I want to talk about. Never overreact. If something happens to you and you don't know the details, don't automatically assume the worst. And that's what we did. We both assumed the worst. And look how much stress that put us under, right? And it was over a stupid coconut. So every time I saw that coconut at my mother's house, I thought of that situation. And it was like very unsettling. I don't know what happened to the coconut. I think my sister has it now. I'm not sure. But my goodness, what a silly fiasco that was all about. Again, this is a true story, guys. And I have many more to come. But anyway, when I was in Hawaii, yeah, we were stationed at the docks in Pearl Harbor. Something really fortunate that happened to us was we were supposed to stay in the barracks at Pearl Harbor. But wouldn't you know it, there was a fleet in town, and the barracks were completely full. So bonus number 2 is we were able to secure a hotel right on Waikiki Beach. You know that Rainbow Hilton Hotel you see in the pictures? We were like right next to that, I think, in a different hotel. But yeah, we completely lucked out. So the Navy paid for us to spend 2 weeks in a hotel on Waikiki Beach. Can you believe that? That was freaking amazing. Of course, we were never in our hotels unless we were sleeping. We'd get up in the morning, and then we had to go to work at the docks, or if it was a weekend, we were just gone all day and night, all day and night. It was pretty interesting. But yeah, that I'll never forget that. And then right there in Pearl Harbor, I don't know if any of you have been there, or Hawaii or anything, but Oahu is the big island where the Pearl Harbor is. And they have the USS Arizona there, memorial. So if you see pictures of that white looking thing, that's the memorial for the USS Arizona. Something like when Japan invaded and bombed Pearl Harbor, there was like, oh my gosh, like I want to say over 1,000 casualties, which accounted for almost half the whole amount of casualties on the attack. So yeah, like something like 1,177 or something I read, people, officers and crew members lost their lives on when the USS Arizona was hit. It had 1.5 million gallons of oil on that ship, and it still leaks today. So you can see it. I have pictures of it. I don't know if I have them that I can show you, but I had pictures where, and you can see them online, there's pictures of the oil that's seeping from under the water for the Arizona. And you can imagine 1.5 million gallons of oil. I read that it's going to be an estimated 500 more years that thing can leak oil. Well, they don't want to disrupt it because, one, it's a sacred memorial, right? They don't want to disrupt it. And secondly, if they try to disrupt it, it could cause a major leak. So they're just going to let it seep. It's not enough to really cause any environmental concerns, I read. So that's just part of the memorial. It's just that oil seeping. And again, it's not enough to cause damage, they say. So I'm not sure about that, but I guess the risk trying to, I don't know why. I think it's more about the idea that it's a sacred place. That was an adventurous 2 weeks that I spent there in Hawaii. It was a great learning experience. We got to work in our rate as SKs, which are storekeepers in the Navy, and we did that for 2 weeks right on the docks there. And you could still see in some of the buildings around Pearl Harbor, the dock area, the bullet holes from the Japanese planes that are like just chewing up the walls, the concrete walls and stuff. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed that story and got a little bit more idea what this grit and this passion and all this stuff is about in our lives. You got to find what you enjoy in life. Like I said, and the stuff that I found a passion for, you know, decades ago, like wanting to go into the military, right now I would not want to do that. It's completely changed. My life has done a complete 180, and that happens with age, right? What passions you have when you're younger will differ from what you might have as a more mature person. So really, yeah, life's about these things. Life's about grit, determination, finding your passion, you know. And if you're young and you're listening to this, you got to find that. You got to discover that early in life. And it's going to change as you get older, right? But, you know, it's important. It sounds hokey and stuff when people say, oh, you got to find your passion. But if you don't, life gets pretty boring, doesn't it? So we got to find what excites us and just go for it. And it doesn't matter what it is, because everybody's different. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for stopping by. If you're new to my channel, my name's Scott, and I like to share these little rides that called Reflect, and I have a variety on my channel, so check it out, and we will see you guys on the next one. Take care. So yeah, I spent 8 years in the Navy. I still got my dog tags here. Never wear them though. But anyway, 8 years, and I was honorably discharged after 2 rounds of re-enlistment. And the reason I walked away is basically, I think it was due to funding. Our reserve center wasn't really doing anything. We didn't have any activities. We didn't have any training. You basically went there to watch PowerPoint presentations, and I'm like, look, I didn't sign up for this. So after I did my 2-year stint, or my 2 rounds of 8 years total, I just told them I'm walking away. I'm not interested anymore. There's no fulfillment here at all. I think it was due to funding, actually. So, yep, got my honorary discharge, and I walked away, and so did my other buddies. And I don't know if it was just a bad commander at that center, but I suspect it was due to lack of fundings for training. It is what it is. But overall, I enjoyed it. It was a good time getting to see Hawaii, and I also went to New Jersey. Spent the night on the ship, actually, USS Shreveport, and that was docked in New Jersey. So I actually slept, I think it was 2 nights on a ship in the ocean, and the bunks that you sleep literally are that, like, you can't even raise your head up. It was like claustrophobic, but man, that was an interesting experience. So, and the friends that I made, I still have contact with one of them after all these years. So it was a good experience. Would I go back into the service nowadays? Depends if you're young. If you want to do that experience, I think it's not a bad deal. But you got to be very careful, like what you sign up for. If you want to be right in the thick of war and stuff, that's different. But also you got to consider, like, if you go into the Marines, the amount of perks you get with that for training, not only Marines, but Army, Navy, Air Force. You can actually, if you do your time, and you get a lot of education that is paid for by the military. At least that's how it used to be. Anyway, I'll quit rambling, but thanks for watching. If you have any questions, if you did serve in the armed forces, leave a comment below. I'd like to know what you did, and it's always cool to share stories about that. So hope you liked it, and we'll see you on the next one.